The snow had been falling for 3 hours when Cassie Lane stopped walking. Not because she was tired. She had been tired since Tuesday. Not because she was cold, though her fingers had stopped hurting somewhere around the second mile, which she understood in the way children understand things they should not have to, meant they were past hurting. She stopped because she had reached the end of the address her mother had made her memorize, and the house in front of her was dark. She stood at the edge of the gravel driveway and looked at it. A single-story house with peeling white paint and a porch light that had burned out sometime before anyone thought to replace it. Two windows facing the road, both black. A rusted mailbox leaning slightly to the left with the number 414 stenciled on the side in fading red paint. Behind the house, just barely visible through the trees, the shape of a large metal barn. Cassie checked the number on the mailbox against the number in her memory. They matched. She had the right place. She adjusted the straps of her backpack, walked up the driveway, climbed the 3 porch steps, and knocked. Nothing. She knocked again. 3 times louder, the kind of knock her mother had always called a serious knock. Not rude, she used to say, just honest. You knock like you mean it, Cass. People can tell the difference. A light came on inside. Not the porch light. Something deeper in the house, yellow and dim, moving. A lamp being carried or a phone screen. Then footsteps. Heavy ones. The kind that belonged to someone big who was not trying to be quiet. The door opened. The man who filled the frame was not what Cassie had expected, though she was not entirely sure what she had expected. He was tall in the way that made the door frame seem like it had been built for someone slightly smaller. Wide shoulders inside a gray thermal shirt that had seen better decades. Dark hair going to gray at the temples, jaw covered in 3 or 4 days of beard that had not been planned. A tattoo visible at the base of his throat, black ink trailing up from his collarbone toward his ear. His eyes were the color of creek water in November, and they were looking down at her with an expression she had learned to read very well over the past 8 years. The expression of someone who did not know what they were looking at. She pulled the photograph from her jacket pocket. It was wrapped in a piece of plastic cut from a sandwich bag because her mother had been careful about things like that. She unwrapped it and held it up. The man in the doorframe went very still. "Are you Griff Morrow?" Cassie said. It was not quite a question. "My mom said you are my father." The silence that followed was long enough that Cassie counted it. 4 seconds. 5. The snow kept falling behind her, soft and indifferent. Somewhere in the trees, an owl made a sound and stopped. Griff Morrow looked at the photograph. Then he looked at the child holding it. Then he looked past her at the empty driveway, the dark road, the wall of snow-filled darkness beyond. His jaw tightened. "Where did you come from?" Cassie put the photograph back in its plastic sleeve and tucked it into her pocket. "My mom is gone. She said if anything happened to her, I had to find you. She said you would know what to do." Another silence. This one shorter and harder. "Kid, I think you have the wrong house." Cassie looked at him steadily. "The photograph has your face in it. The address on the back matches your mailbox. And my mom said your name is Griff Morrow, and that you rode with the Iron Wolves for 11 years, and that before everything went wrong, you were the only person she ever trusted completely." She paused. "Do you still want me to have the wrong house?" Something moved behind his eyes. Not softness, not recognition. Something more complicated. Something that looked like a man watching a wall he built a long time ago develop a crack he had not planned for. He stepped back from the door. Not an invitation exactly, more like a withdrawal. "Come inside. You are going to freeze." Cassie picked up her backpack from where she had set it on the porch and walked past him into the house. Inside was warmer than outside, which was the most she could say for it. A front room with a couch that had lived its best years sometime in the previous century. A coffee table with a ring stain in the shape of a mug and a stack of papers that had not been looked at in a while. A lamp in the corner casting yellow light over everything. On the wall, a single-framed photograph of mountains that Cassie did not recognize. No Christmas decorations, no family pictures, no sign that anyone had expected company or had received any in some time. Griff closed the door behind her. He did not move further into the room. He stood near the door with his arms crossed and watched her the way a man watches something he has not decided about yet. Cassie set her backpack on the floor and sat on the edge of the couch without being asked. She was not trying to make herself at home. She was trying to take the weight off her feet, which had been inside wet boots since sometime Tuesday morning. She folded her hands in her lap and looked at him. How long have you been walking, he said. Since Tuesday. A truck driver gave me a ride for part of it. Then I walked. It is Thursday night, I know. Griff looked at her for a long moment. Then he moved to the kitchen doorway and stopped with his back to her. She heard a cabinet open, the sound of water running, the click of a stove burner. Where is your mother? Cassie looked at the mountain photograph on the wall. The peaks were snow-covered and very far away. A river somewhere in the foreground, frozen at the edges. She died on Sunday. In a motel called the Pine View outside of a town called Garnet Falls. She had been sick for a while. She could not breathe right at the end. She kept saying my name, and then she stopped. The kitchen went quiet. Cassie continued looking at the mountains. I stayed with her for a while because I did not know what else to do. Then I remembered what she told me. She made me memorize the address. She made me memorize your name. She said it like she had been planning it for a long time, which I think she had. Griff came back to the doorway. He was holding a mug of something, and he set it on the coffee table in front of her without saying anything. Hot chocolate, she realized when the smell reached her. The instant kind, but hot. She wrapped both hands around it and felt her fingers begin to come back to life, which hurt, which she understood was supposed to. Sit, he said. She was already sitting. He meant stay. She recognized the difference. He moved to the chair across from her and sat down heavily, the way large men sit when they are trying to slow something down inside themselves. He leaned forward with his elbows on his knees and looked at the floor for a moment. Then he looked at her. How old are you? 8. He nodded like this was information he was absorbing rather than receiving. What is your full name? Cassie Eleanor Lane. Lane was your mother's name. Yes, she used it for both of us. He was quiet again. Then he said very carefully, I knew a woman named Nora Lane. A long time ago. We were. He stopped. We knew each other. She left without telling me where she was going and I did not hear from her again. That was 9 years ago. She left because of Harlan Voss, Cassie said. Something crossed his face so fast she almost missed it. Not quite fear, not quite recognition. Something between the two. She left because she found out what he was. Cassie continued, and she was scared of what he would do. To her and to you. She said he was the kind of man who hurt everyone around the people he was really after. She said she could not let that happen. Griff stood up. He walked to the window and stood there with his back to her, looking out at the snow. She said she tried to call you, Cassie said. 3 times. He did not move. You did not pick up. The room was very quiet for a moment, just the sound of the wind outside and the distant ticking of something in the kitchen. No, Griff said finally. I did not. His voice was flat, not defensive. The voice of a man accepting something he has been carrying for a long time, having it confirmed rather than revealed. She did not blame you, Cassie said. She told me that specifically. She said you had your own troubles then, and she understood. Griff turned from the window. His face had settled into something harder and quieter than before. She told you a lot. She told me everything she could. She said she did not want to leave me without knowing the important things. Cassie reached for the mug again. The chocolate was still warm. She drank slowly the way her mother had taught her. Make things last when you can, Cass. You never know when there will be more. What did she tell you about me specifically, Griff said. That you rode with a motorcycle club called the Iron Wolves for 11 years. That you were the best mechanic anyone had ever met. That you had a temper when you were younger, but that it came from caring too much and not knowing what to do with it. That you were the kind of man who showed up when things were bad, not when they were easy. She looked at him. She said that was the rarest thing she ever found in a person. Someone who shows up when things are hard. Griff sat back down in the chair. He put his face in his hands for a moment. Just a moment. Then he dropped them and looked at her with those creek water eyes. The photograph, he said. Where did you get it? Cassie took it out of her pocket again. Unwrapped the plastic carefully, held it out to him. He took it with both hands, held it under the lamplight. It was a photograph of a younger version of himself, recognizable in the jaw and shoulders, even with the decades softened by age. He was standing in front of a truck, somewhere laughing at something outside the frame. Beside him, a woman with dark hair and an expression caught halfway between a smile and something more careful. She was looking at the camera as though she had decided to trust it, but was not entirely sure she had made the right call. He stared at it for a long time. Mom kept it in the lining of her travel bag, Cassie said. She had it sewn in there. She took it out and showed me when I was about 5. She told me his name and the address, and she made me practice until I could say both without looking. Then she sewed it back in. She had planned this for years. Yes, she planned a lot of things. She was good at planning ahead. Griff was still looking at the photograph. She looks the same, he said quietly. Mostly. She looked tired at the end, but she still looked like herself. He handed the photograph back carefully. Cassie wrapped it in the plastic and put it back in her pocket. I need to tell you something else, Cassie said. Something important. Griff looked at her. She reached into her backpack and pulled out a black thumb drive. It was inside a small, zippered pouch that her mother had attached to the inside lining of the bag, the same way she had sewn the photograph into the travel bag. Cassie had found it the morning after her mother died while she was trying to figure out what to bring. Mom left this. She said it was only for you. She said no one else. Not a police officer, not a social worker, not a well-meaning stranger. Only you. Griff looked at the drive in her hand. He did not reach for it yet. Do you know what is on it? Some of it. She told me some. She said it was proof. Everything she had collected about Harlan Voss over 8 years. She said it was enough to put him away and everyone who helped him. She said she kept it because someday someone would need to use it, and she needed it to be someone she trusted completely. She trusted me. She always trusted you. That was the one thing that did not change. Griff took the drive, held it in his palm, and looked at it the way a person looks at something they do not yet understand the full weight of. The snow was still falling outside. The lamp in the corner flickered once and steadied. Cassie finished the last of the hot chocolate and set the mug back on the coffee table, careful to use the existing ring stain rather than make a new one. You should sleep, Griff said. I am okay. You walked for 3 days. You should sleep. Cassie looked at him. What happens tomorrow? He looked back at her. The expression on his face was one she recognized but could not name. It was the expression of a man who has just walked into a room and discovered it is not the room he thought it was and that there is no door back to the hallway. Tomorrow we figure out what is on that drive, he said, and we figure out who Harlan Voss knows in this county. He knows a lot of people, Cassie said. Mom was very specific about that. How specific? She said the sheriff keeps him informed. She said there is a detective named Harkin who does things for him that other people are not supposed to know about. She said the local judges have received money. She said there is a federal agent somewhere who is supposed to be watching him but is instead protecting him. Griff was very still. She said all of that. She said the only person she ever found who was outside his reach was a woman named Petra Dunwald. She used to work for the FBI 12 years ago in organized crime. Voss did something to her. Mom never told me exactly what. But she said if everything fell apart, Petra Dunwald was the one person whose name I should remember. Griff stood up. He walked to the window again and stood there a long time looking out at the snow. Cassie watched him. She was good at watching people. Her mother had taught her that too. You watch the hands first, her mother used to say. Then the shoulders. The face will tell you what a person wants you to know. The hands and shoulders will tell you the truth. Griff's hands were at his sides, completely still. His shoulders were carrying something invisible and very heavy. Finally, he said without turning, "Your mother was a brave woman." Yes, Cassie said, she was. She was also in a great deal of danger for a very long time. 8 years, since before I was born mostly. The last year was the worst. He found us twice. We had to move in the middle of the night both times. Mom always had a bag packed. I had one too. Mine had a stuffed bear and a change of clothes and a granola bar in a Ziploc. She trained me to be ready. Griff finally turned from the window. He looked at her with an expression she had not seen from an adult in a long time. It was not pity exactly. It was something quieter and more painful than pity. How old are you again? 8. He nodded slowly. Then he went to the hallway and came back with a folded blanket and a pillow that had seen better years. He set them on the couch beside her. The room at the end of the hall has a bed, but the heater in there is broken. You will be warmer out here. There is a bathroom through that door on the left. I will find something for you to eat in the morning. He moved toward the hallway. Then he stopped. The photograph, he said. In it, your mother. How old was she when it was taken? Cassie thought about it. She looks about 26, maybe 27. She said it was the summer she was happiest. He stood in the hallway doorway for a moment. Cassie could not see his face clearly from where she was sitting. Only the outline of him, big and still, against the darker dark of the hall. "Get some sleep," he said. Then he was gone. Cassie lay down on the couch and pulled the blanket up to her chin. The lamp in the corner was still on. She did not ask him to turn it off. She had not slept in the dark since Sunday. She listened to the house settle around her, the tick of something in the kitchen, the soft press of the snow against the windows. Somewhere deeper in the house, the sound of a man sitting down in a chair and not moving. She reached into her jacket pocket and wrapped her hand around the photograph still inside his plastic sleeve. She did not take it out, just held it through the fabric. Her mother had said in those last clear hours before the breathing got too hard that Griff Morrow would not be what Cassie expected. She said people who had lived hard lives wore them on the outside in ways that made strangers nervous. She said, "Do not let the outside of a person tell you their whole story, Cass. You of all people should know that by now." Cassie had known. She had spent her whole life being underestimated by people who looked at her and saw a small girl in worn clothes and thought they understood everything about her. She knew what it was to be more than your surface. She closed her eyes in the lamplight and thought about her mother's voice, the way it sounded when she was telling a story, steady and unhurried like water that has decided where it is going and is not in any rush. She thought about the motel room on Sunday and the particular quality of the silence when the breathing stopped. The way a room changes when the person who made it a room is no longer in it. She had stayed for a long time after, not because she did not know her mother was gone. She knew. She had known the moment it happened. She stayed because leaving felt like the last goodbye, and she had not been ready for the last one. But eventually she had stood up. She had looked around the room and taken the things that mattered. The photograph, the thumb drive, a small note her mother had written and tucked under the edge of the lamp where Cassie would find it. The note said only, "You know what to do. You have always known. I love you more than the whole sky." She had folded the note and put it in her pocket with the photograph. She had shouldered her backpack. She had opened the motel room door and walked into the cold morning air and started walking north because north was the direction of the address she had memorized. 3 days later, she was here. She did not know yet if here was safe. She had learned enough about the world to know that safe was not a destination. It was something you rebuilt every day out of whatever materials you had. But there was something in the way Griff had taken the photograph with both hands, something in the careful way he had set the mug on the table and said, "Only come inside. You are going to freeze." That made her think this place might be something. Not safe exactly, but something. She was asleep before she finished the thought. In the morning, she woke to gray light and the smell of coffee and the sound of someone moving quietly in the kitchen in the way that people move when they are trying not to disturb something. She lay still for a moment and listened. The house felt different in daylight, less provisional, more like a place that had made certain commitments to standing, even if it had not always kept them. She sat up. Through the window, the snow had stopped. The world outside was white and still and very bright. She found the bathroom and washed her face and looked at herself in the mirror for a moment. She looked like what she was. A child who had not slept enough or eaten enough or had enough of anything except forward motion. She went to the kitchen. Griff was standing at the counter with a mug of coffee and the thumb drive on the table in front of him. He had not plugged it in yet. He was looking at it the way a person looks at a letter they know contains news they are not sure they are ready for. He looked up when she came in. "There is bread," he said, "and peanut butter." He nodded toward the counter. Cassie made herself a piece of toast with peanut butter and sat at the kitchen table. Griff stayed standing. She did not push him. She had learned that some people needed to be standing when they had difficult conversations. It was not rudeness, it was just the way their bodies managed what their minds were working through. She ate half the toast. Then she said, "Are you going to look at what is on it?" "Not yet. I need to understand something first." "Okay," he looked at her, not unkindly, more like a man trying to be precise about something important. "Your mother, did she ever tell you specifically what she had on Voss?" "Not in general, specifically." Cassie thought about it. She said there were financial records, payments to police officers and judges. A list of names of people he controlled through what he knew about them. She said there were recordings, his voice giving orders. She said there was evidence about a man named Aldrich, a state court judge who died in a car accident 4 years ago, and that the accident was not an accident. Griff was very still. She said she could prove Voss ordered it. She said that was the most dangerous thing on the drive because Aldrich had a son who was a federal prosecutor in Portland, and if he ever found out what really happened to his father, then Voss would lose the one thing he depended on most, which was everyone being afraid to go after him. Cassie finished the toast. She also said there were names of women, people Voss had hurt in ways that never made it to a courtroom. She said one of them was a federal agent who had been building a case against him 12 years ago, and that Voss had found out and used what he knew about her to shut it down. She said that woman had been quiet ever since, but that she was still out there. Petra Dunwald Griff said, "Yes." He picked up his coffee mug and set it down without drinking from it. The sound of it on the table was the only noise in the kitchen for a moment. "Your mother was building a case," he said, "for 8 years, alone. She was not entirely alone. She said there were people who helped her in small ways along the way. People who let her stay somewhere when she needed it. People who looked the other way. But mostly alone, yes. While keeping you safe. While keeping me safe." He looked at the ceiling for a moment, then back down at the table. "She was," he said, and stopped. Cassie waited. "She was something else, Nora Lane." "Yes," Cassie said. "She was." The kitchen was quiet again. Outside, a bird landed on the fence post, visible through the window, and sat there for a moment before deciding the cold was not worth it and leaving. Griff pulled out the chair across from Cassie and sat down. He picked up the drive. He looked at it. "We need a computer," he said. "I know, but not here." He looked at her. "Mom said never to open it somewhere that could be traced back to you. She said Voss has people who monitor things. She said if he sees unusual activity connected to anyone investigating him, he acts fast and he does not ask questions first." "Where then?" "There is a women's shelter." Mom mentioned it. "She stayed there once a few years ago. She said the woman who runs it has helped people disappear when the system failed them. She said if we needed somewhere safe to look at what was on the drive, it would be there." "What is the name of the place?" Mom called it Wren's place. She said everyone called the woman Wren because she was small and fast, and her doors were always open to the right people. Griff sat back. He was not quite smiling, but his expression had shifted slightly into something that was not unfamiliar to him. "Wren Calloway," he said. "I know who she is." Cassie felt something loosen very slightly in her chest. Not relief exactly, more like the feeling of a map confirming what you thought you remembered. "Then we should go there," she said. "Not yet. There is something I need to know first." She waited. He looked at her steadily. "You said Voss found you twice in the last year. What does that mean, he found you? What happened?" Cassie looked at the table. The wood was old and had been scratched in various places by things that had lived here before her. She traced one of the scratches with her finger. The first time was in January. "We were in a town called Becker Ridge. We had been there 4 months, which was the longest we had stayed anywhere in 2 years. Mom thought we had finally gotten far enough ahead of him. We were wrong. We came home from the grocery store, and the lock on our apartment door had been broken and put back crooked. Mom saw it before we even got to the door. She grabbed my hand and we walked back to the car, and we drove for 6 hours without stopping." Griff said nothing. "The second time was in September. We were living outside a town called Millhaven under different names. We had been very careful. But someone at the school saw something and said something to someone they should not have said it to, and 3 days later, there was a man watching the street outside our window from a car that was parked just slightly wrong. Mom spotted him in the morning. By noon, we were gone again. She stopped tracing the scratch. She was very good at spotting things that were slightly wrong. She taught me to see them too. The car parked at an angle. The man standing somewhere with nothing to do. The person who looks at you 1 second too long." Griff nodded slowly, like someone who recognized the curriculum. "How long has she been sick?" he said. "About a year. Maybe a little longer. She called it a tired sickness at first. Then it got worse. She could not afford a doctor. We could not stay in one place long enough for proper treatment, even if she could have afforded it. She said it was not the sickness that would kill her, it was the running. but she kept running anyway. Because of you. Because of me, Cassie said simply. She did not say it as though it was something she had not yet processed. She said it the way children who have been trusted with adult truths say them, with a clarity that costs something but does not collapse. Griff was looking at her with the expression she could not quite name, the one that was not pity but was something adjacent to it and much more complicated. She did something remarkable, he said. She was my mom, Cassie said. She was just being my mom. Outside, the morning was getting lighter. The snow on the ground caught the sun and turned the world outside the window into something almost blindingly clean. Griff stood up. He put the drive in his shirt pocket. Get your things, he said. We are going to see Wren Calloway. Cassie finished her toast and went to the front room to collect her backpack. She put her arms through the strays and adjusted them the way her mother had shown her. Left strap first, then right, then tighten the chest strap so the weight sits high. That way you can walk longer without it pulling you down. She went back to the kitchen doorway and looked at Griff. He was standing by the door pulling on a jacket. Old leather, dark brown, iron wool's patch on the back. He caught her looking at the patch and looked at it himself for a moment. Then he shrugged it on the rest of the way. My mom said you wore a jacket like that when she knew you, Cassie said. I have worn it for a long time. She said it was the first thing she noticed about you. Not the jacket, the way you wore it, like you had made peace with who you were and were not apologizing. Griff looked at her. His expression was unreadable now, the kind of unreadable that takes years to learn. She said a lot of things about me. She talked about you every time we had to move, when things were at their worst. I think saying your name was something that helped her, like proof that good things had existed even if they were far away. He held the door open. Cold morning air rolled into the kitchen. Come on, he said quietly. Cassie walked past him and out into the white morning. The bike was in the metal barn behind the house. Griff rolled it out into the driveway and checked something near the engine that Cassie did not understand but watched carefully anyway. He found a spare helmet hanging on a hook inside the barn and adjusted the strap until it fit around Cassie's head without sliding. It is big, he said. I know. Hold on tight and lean when I lean. Do not fight the turns. I understand. He looked at her for a moment with the helmet on her head. Something passed across his face quickly. A flicker. Gone before she could name it. He started the engine. The sound of it was large in the quiet morning. He swung onto the bike and Cassie climbed up behind him and took hold of the sides of his jacket. They pulled out of the driveway and onto the empty road. The snow had stopped hours ago, and the plows had come through the main road at some point in the night, leaving it clear and wet and gray. On either side, the pine trees stood in their white silence. Cassie held on and watched the road unspool behind them. She thought about her mother in the weeks before the end, the way Nora had been doing something different with her. Not just the address and the name and the instructions about the drive. She had been telling stories. Not the running kind of stories. The before kind. The time she and Griff had driven 8 hours to see a band play in a town neither of them could spell. The time they had fixed a stranger's truck on the side of the road at 2 in the morning, and the man had cried actual tears because he had been trying to get home for 3 days. The time she had known before anything else that he was someone she could trust because he had stopped to help someone who had nothing to offer him in return. She had been building something in Cassie's mind, not just a contact, not just an address, a person. She had wanted Cassie to know him before she met him. The trees thinned as they reached the edge of town and then gathered again on the other side. The shelter was further than the town, down a dirt road that had been cleared recently enough to still show tire tracks. It looked abandoned from the outside. Peeling paint-boarded windows, a hand-lettered sign by the road that said only closed. But the tire tracks went right up to the door, and when Griff knocked, a curtain moved in the window. Footsteps, a latch turning. Then the door opened to a woman who was exactly as her name suggested. Small, quick-eyed, somewhere in her late 50s, with gray-streaked hair pulled back and an expression that evaluated things fast and decided faster. She looked at Griff. She looked at Cassie. She looked at the backpack. Then she opened the door the rest of the way and stood aside. Inside was nothing like the outside. Clean floors. Organized. A warren of small rooms off a central hallway, each one having the particular quality of a space that had been used for serious purposes. The kind of place where decisions get made and not regretted. Ren Calloway looked at Cassie, and something in her face changed. Not softness exactly. Recognition. You have Nora's eyes, she said. I knew her, briefly, but I knew her. She died on Sunday, Cassie said. Ren was quiet for a moment. Then she nodded once the way people nod when news confirms something they have been bracing for. Then you are here about what she carried, Ren said. We need a computer, Griff said, one that is not connected to anything he can reach. Ren looked at him, then at Cassie, then back at him. Follow me, she said. She led them down the hall to a back room with a single window and a desk and a computer that was old enough to have been safe by virtue of being entirely offline. She pulled out a chair for Cassie and sat herself against the wall with her arms folded. Griff took the drive from his pocket and handed it to Cassie. Not because he did not know how to open it, because he understood in some wordless way that this was hers to open. Cassie plugged it in. The files loaded slowly, documents first, then folders of photographs, then audio files, then a video file at the bottom of the directory dated 4 days before Sunday. The name of it was simply a word, the same word Nora had said to Cassie in those last clear hours, whispering it against her daughter's hair with what breath she had left. Ready. Cassie looked at the file. Then she looked at Griff, who was standing behind her, and to the left, not hovering, just present in the way that she was beginning to understand was simply how he occupied a room when something important was happening. She looked at Ren, who said nothing, just watched. Then she clicked the file open. Her mother's face filled the screen, tired and thin and entirely herself. She was sitting in the motel room that Cassie recognized from the particular water stain above the dresser. She was looking directly into the camera with an expression of absolute calm that Cassie understood had not come easily and had been chosen on purpose. If you are watching this, Nora Lane said, then it went the way I was afraid it would, and Cassie found you, which means she is safe enough, at least for now. Griff made a sound that was very small and almost not a sound at all. Nora kept talking. Her voice was steady, precise, the voice of a woman who has thought carefully about every word she intends to say and knows she only gets to say them once. Cassie watched her mother's face on the screen and held very still. Outside the shelter, the morning sun was moving across the snow. The world was very bright and very cold and entirely indifferent to what was happening in the small back room where a little girl sat watching her dead mother speak. But in that room at that moment, something was beginning. Something that 8 years of careful, frightened, determined work had been building toward. Something that a woman who could not breathe had passed to a child who could in the form of a plastic drive sewn into the lining of a bag. The truth does not need courage to exist. It just sits there patient and immovable, waiting for someone willing to carry it forward. Cassie had been carrying it for 3 days through the snow. She was not going to stop now. Nora Lane spoke for 19 minutes. She did not rush. She did not cry. She spoke the way she had always spoken when she wanted Cassie to remember something exactly right. Measured and clear, like a person reading from a document they have written and rewritten until every word is the correct one. She began with Harlan Voss. Not who he appeared to be, which was a man of considerable property and civic standing in 3 counties, whose name appeared on the sides of buildings and in the donor lists of local hospitals, and whose photograph had been taken with 2 governors and a senator. She began with who he actually was, which she had spent 8 years documenting, with the patience of someone who understood that the truth is only useful when it is irrefutable. The financial records on the drive covered 11 years of payments, to sheriff's deputies, to county commissioners, to 2 circuit court judges, to a state assemblyman whose name Cassie did not recognize, but whose face Griff clearly did from the way his jaw tightened when Nora said it. The payments were not large individually. They never were, Nora explained. Large payments create paper trails and attract attention. Small, regular payments made through shell companies and coded as consulting fees or property management retainers, those disappear into the background noise of ordinary business. She had traced 47 of them. Then there was the blackmail. Nora had documented 19 individuals whom Voss controlled not through money but through knowledge. Things they had done that they needed no one to know about. She had names, dates, and in several cases recordings of conversations in which Voss made the terms of these arrangements explicit. His voice on those recordings was calm and businesslike, which Cassie found more frightening than anger would have been. Anger has an edge you can feel coming. That calm had no edge at all, just a flat, reasonable expectation of compliance. Then Nora described the accident that was not an accident. Judge Harlan Aldridge, state court, 14 years on the bench, had died in what was recorded as a single-vehicle accident on a mountain road in October 4 years ago. Black ice, the report said. A curve taken too fast. He had been alone in the car, and the car had gone off the road and down a slope, and that was the official end of it. Nora had found three things that contradicted this account. A mechanic in a town 40 miles away who had been paid in cash to perform a specific modification to a brake line. A gas station receipt placing one of Voss's known associates on that road 2 hours before the accident. And a voicemail saved and transferred and saved again across 5 different phones over 4 years, in which Harlan Voss said to a man whose name was on the associate list that the Aldridge situation needed to be resolved before the end of the month, and that he was confident in the resolution being permanent. Nora said she had verified the voice on the voicemail through 2 separate audio analysis services, both accessed through anonymous accounts at public library computers in towns she had passed through. She had done all of this while working part-time jobs under assumed names and moving every 3 to 5 months and raising a child alone. Cassie watched her mother's face on the screen and felt the familiar, complicated feeling she had been carrying since Sunday. Not grief exactly, though grief was part of it. More like the feeling of finally understanding the full dimensions of something you have been living inside without being able to see its edges. Then Nora said the name Petra Dunwald, and her voice changed. Not much, just slightly. The way a voice changes when it arrives at something that costs it something to say. 12 years ago, Nora said Petra Dunwald was a special agent with the FBI's Organized Crime Division. She had been building a case against Voss for 18 months. She was close enough that Voss became aware of her. He did not respond the way he usually responded to threats, which was through money or leverage applied at a distance. He responded personally. What he did to her, Nora said, is documented in the last folder on the drive in a file she had named simply PD. She said she had not read that file more than once, and she would not describe its contents aloud because some things should only be said once, and with the person present who deserved to have it witnessed properly. What she would say was this: Petra Dunwald had left the Bureau shortly afterward. The official reason was a voluntary resignation citing personal circumstances. The unofficial reason, which Nora had pieced together through years of careful indirect research, was that Voss had made it known to her in terms that could not be misunderstood what would happen if she did not disappear quietly. She had disappeared quietly. Nora did not blame her. She said she understood better than most what it meant to make that calculation. But she was still out there. And she was the only person Nora had identified in 12 years of looking who was both outside Voss's current reach and in possession of enough existing knowledge to understand what the drive contained and what to do with it. Cassie, Nora said on the screen, looking directly into the camera with those dark, tired eyes. I know you memorized the name. You are good at memorizing things. Use it. Then she said one more thing. She said it quietly, and she said it to Griff, not to Cassie, and she said it looking at the camera as though she could see through it and across the years to wherever he would be sitting when he heard it. She said, I am sorry I did not trust you enough to let you help me. I was trying to protect you. I think you will understand that. I think you, of all people, will understand making a decision to carry something alone to keep someone else from having to carry it. I think you have made that same decision more than once. She paused. Take care of her. She is braver than she knows and smarter than she lets on, and she will absolutely try to do everything herself if you let her. Do not let her. The video ended. The room was very quiet. Cassie stared at the dark screen for a moment. Then she looked at her hands in her lap. Then she looked at Wren, who had tears on her face and was making no effort to conceal them. Then she looked at Griff. He was standing against the wall with his arms at his sides and his eyes fixed on the middle distance in the way that people fix their eyes on things that are not there when they are trying not to show what is happening inside them. His jaw was set. His hands were open at his sides, fingers straight. He was breathing carefully. She gave him time. She was good at that. After a while, he said very quietly, we need to look at the rest of the files. They spent the next 2 hours going through the drive. Wren sat with them and said very little. Griff stood, mostly moving to the chair occasionally and then back to standing, as though sitting still was not something his body was willing to commit to. Cassie sat in the chair and scrolled and read and listened to the audio files through the computer's small speakers. The documents were organized with the precision of someone who had no administrative support and no office and no filing system, except her own mind, and knew that precision was the only thing standing between the truth and its disappearance. Dates were verified against multiple sources. Names were cross-referenced. Every payment had a corresponding notation explaining the source of the information and how it had been obtained and where the original evidence was located. The photographs were harder. Some of them were of documents taken carefully to be legible. Some of them were of people. A few of them were of things Nora had clearly felt needed to be documented, but that Cassie understood in the way she understood most things were not for her to look at closely. She moved past those without dwelling. The audio files were the most damaging. Voss's voice appeared in 11 of them. In 3, he was giving what could only be described as instructions. In 2, he was discussing specific individuals by name in terms that made his relationship to them unambiguous. In 1, the longest, he was explaining to someone whose voice trembled slightly throughout the conversation exactly what the consequences would be if a particular arrangement was not maintained. He explained it calmly and in detail, and with the air of someone who has given this particular explanation before and found it effective. When they reached the folder marked PD, Griff put his hand on the desk beside the mouse without quite touching it. "This one we read together," he said. "And we only read it once." Cassie nodded. They read it once. When they were finished, Wren stood up and walked out of the room. They heard her footsteps go down the hall and a door close at the end. She came back 5 minutes later with her face composed and her hands steady, and sat back down without speaking. Griff said, "We need to find Dunwall before we do anything else." "I know how," Cassie said. Both adults looked at her. "Mom left contact information in the last document in that folder. Not a phone number. An address for a post office box in a town called Fairview. In a phrase. She said if I sent a letter to that address with that phrase in the first line, Dunwall would know what it meant. That could take days," Griff said. "Mom said there was a faster way if things were urgent. She said Dunwall checks a specific online forum under a specific username every morning at 7. She said if someone posts a certain message in that forum, Dunwall will respond within the hour." "What forum?" "It is a forum for people interested in amateur radio. The username is WB7NRQ. The message is a short sentence about propagation conditions." Mom wrote it down in the file. Griff looked at her for a moment. "Your mother," he said slowly. "I know," Cassie said. "How does a person learn to build something like this?" "I think she learned it the same way she learned everything else," Cassie said. "By needing to." Wren stood up and moved to the computer. She pulled up a browser and navigated to the forum and found the thread and typed the message exactly as it appeared in the document. Then they waited. 43 minutes later, a reply appeared. It contained only a phone number and the word "when." Griff took out his own phone and called the number. The woman who answered had a voice that was controlled in the way that voices are controlled when the control has been maintained for a very long time and has become structural rather than chosen. She listened while Griff explained in brief and careful terms what they had and where it had come from. She asked 2 questions. He answered both. There was a silence long enough to be significant. Then she said she would be in contact within 24 hours and ended the call. "We wait," Griff said. "Not for long," Cassie said. "No, not for long." The waiting lasted less time than any of them expected, because at 11:47 in the morning, Griff's phone rang with a number he did not recognize, and the voice on the other end was not Petra Dunwald. It was smooth and unhurried and carried the particular quality of authority that comes not from position, but from the long habit of being obeyed. "Mr. Morrow," Harlan Voss said, "I understand you have found something that belongs to me." The room went entirely still. Wren froze. Griff's eyes moved to Cassie immediately, a reflex making sure she was there and intact. Cassie looked at the phone in his hand. Then she reached out and took it. Griff's hand tightened for a fraction of a second and then released. He let her have it. She did not know why he trusted her in that moment. She was grateful that he did. She put the phone to her ear. "Mr. Voss," she said. A pause. Brief and controlled. "You must be the child," Voss said. "My name is Cassie Lane. My mother was Nora Lane." I think you know who she was. I knew her, yes. I was very sorry to hear about her passing. His voice was gentle. That was the most frightening thing about it. He deployed gentleness the way another person might deploy a weapon, precisely and with intent. We have everything she collected, Cassie said, everything she documented over 8 years. We have your voice on recordings. We have financial records with your signature. We have evidence about Judge Aldridge. She watched Griff's face as she said it. He was watching her with an expression she could not entirely read. Something between alarm and something that might have been underneath everything else, the very beginning of something else. That is a very serious claim for a little girl to make, Voss said. I am not making a claim. I am telling you what exists. And what is it you want, Cassie? She had thought about this moment, not specifically, not in these words, but in the general shape of it. Her mother had told her once that the most important thing in any conversation with a person who has power over you is to understand what they want before they understand what you need. I want you to understand that we have already made copies, she said, and that if anything happens to us or to Wren Calloway, those copies go to people you cannot reach. Another pause. Longer this time. You have clearly been well coached. My mother coached me. She was very thorough. She was, Voss said. She was an exceptionally thorough woman. It was one of the things that made her so frustrating. His voice was still gentle, but underneath the gentleness now there was something else. Not quite anger, more like the sound of a man who has been patient for a very long time, arriving at the outer edge of his patience. Bring me the drive, he said. Bring it to my office in town. Bring the child. We will discuss arrangements that work for everyone. We will not be doing that, Cassie said. Then I will come to you, and the conversation will be less comfortable for everyone involved. She said you should know that this call is being recorded. She did not know if that was true. She said it anyway. Her mother had taught her that the most effective statements are the ones your opponent cannot afford to test. The line went dead. Cassie set the phone on the desk. Her hands were steady. She noted this with a distant kind of interest, the way she noted most things about herself in difficult moments, as data rather than feeling. Griff was looking at her. He is coming, she said, or he is sending someone. I know. Wren was already moving. She went to the front of the building and checked the locks on the door and came back. We have an hour, she said. Maybe less. He has a man named Harkin who moves fast. I know about Harkin, Griff said. Then you know we cannot be here when he arrives. Cassie looked at the computer. She had been thinking since the phone call. Not frantically. The way her mother had taught her to think when things move fast. From the outside in. Start with what you know is true, then work toward what you need. I need to send something first, she said. Wren looked at her. Mom said there was a journalist, a woman named Blythe Harmon in Millhaven. She said she had been trying to build a story about Voss for 3 years, but could never get anyone to talk. She said she was honest and she was careful, and she did not owe anything to anyone Voss owned, because she had turned down the job at the regional paper, where his money had reached, and worked instead for a small, independent outlet that ran on subscriptions. How does your mother know all of this? Wren said. She researched her. She researched everyone she thought might matter someday. She did it the same way she did everything, carefully and over a long time. Cassie went back to the computer. She found the last document on the drive, the one with the contact protocols. Blythe Harmon's email address was there, along with a brief note in Nora's handwriting that said she will know what to do with it. Trust her the way you trust the drive, because she earned it the same way I did. Cassie composed the email. She kept it short. She said who she was and who her mother was and what they had. She said the drive contained documentation of crimes including murder and that it was being transferred to federal law enforcement, but that she wanted a journalist to have a copy independently in case anything happened before that process was complete. She said she was 80 years old and she was not confused about any of this. She attached the contents of the drive. It took 4 minutes to upload. She sent it. Then she looked at Griff. Now we go, she said. They went. Griff took the drive and put it back in his pocket. Wren gathered a bag from a back room that had the quality of a bag that had been packed for emergencies before and was kept ready for the next one. They went out through the back of the building rather than the front, through a door that opened onto a path through the trees that Wren walked without hesitation, which meant she had walked it before. They came out on a back road where Wren's truck was parked old and nondescript and pointed in the right direction. She drove without being told where, and Griff sat in the passenger seat and Cassie sat in the back, and they went. They were 6 miles out when Griff's phone rang again. He looked at the number. Then he showed it to Wren, who pressed her lips together. "Hearken," she said. He answered it. The voice on the other end was nothing like Voss's. Where Voss was smooth, this voice was flat and functional. The voice of a man who had long ago stopped thinking about how he sounded and thought only about what he needed to accomplish. "You left the shelter," Harkin said. "That was not smart." "We were not planning to stay," Griff said. "Mr. Voss would like to resolve this without things becoming complicated. Things are already complicated. They do not have to be. The girl is his daughter. He has legal standing. You are a man with a significant criminal record who has taken a minor across state lines. That is kidnapping, Mr. Morrow. That is federal. She came to me. That is not how it will be described." Cassie leaned forward from the back seat. Griff held the phone so she could speak into it without taking it from him. "My mother left documentation of a conversation in which you are given instructions about a witness who saw Mr. Voss commit an assault," she said. "That witness died 6 months later. Her name was Carol Meade. She had 3 children." Silence. "I memorized her name because my mother said it was important to remember the people who got hurt and not just the people who hurt them." The line went dead. Wren drove. The road unwound ahead of them through pine trees and open fields white with snow. The sky above was the particular pale blue of cold, clear days, enormous and indifferent. "He is going to move fast now," Griff said. "I know." Cassie sat back. "We need Dunwald." As if in response to this, Griff's phone buzzed, a message from the number he had called earlier that morning. It said, "Only I am 2 hours out. Do not let them take the child." Something shifted in the truck. Not relief, something more tentative than that. The sense of a wall holding under pressure that had not finished arriving. They drove to a motel on the far side of the county that Wren said was owned by a woman who had stayed at the shelter years ago and who could be trusted to rent a room without asking questions that would find their way to the wrong ears. The woman at the desk looked at them for a long moment and then looked at Cassie and nodded and found a room at the back of the building that did not face the parking lot. Inside, Cassie sat on the edge of the bed, and Griff stood by the window, and Wren made coffee from the small machine on the dresser. Nobody said much. There was a particular quality to the silence that Cassie recognized from her life with her mother. The silence of people who have done what they can do for now and are waiting for the next thing to become clear. After a while, Griff said, "What did your mother tell you about me? Before the important things, before the address and the instructions." Cassie thought about it. "She told me about the truck on the side of the road. The stranger at 2 in the morning. He was quiet. She said you did not even slow down to calculate whether it was worth it. You just stopped. She said that was when she knew what kind of person you were. I was younger then. She said you were exactly the same when she met you as you had been for a long time. She said that was the thing about you that she trusted most, that you were consistent. Most people, she said, are kind when it is easy. You were kind when it cost something." Griff looked out the window at the parking lot. "I was not always kind," he said. She knew that. She said you were not always kind, but you were always honest about what you were, and you did not pretend to be something better when you were not. She said that was its own kind of integrity. The motel room was warm and smelled of old carpet and cheap coffee. Outside, a truck passed on the road, and its headlights swept through the curtains and moved on. Griff turned from the window. "Can I ask you something?" "Yes." "Are you scared?" Cassie considered the question seriously, the way she considered all serious questions. "I am something," she said. "I do not know if scared is exactly the word. It is more like I am very aware of how important it is that I do not make a mistake. And that feeling is very large. But it is not the same as scared." He nodded. "Your mother said you were braver than you know." "She said that to me too. I told her I did not think I was brave. I thought I just did not have the option of being anything else. She said that was what brave was." Wren set a cup of coffee on the table and looked at Cassie. "Do you want something to eat?" Cassie realized she did. She had not thought about food since the peanut butter toast that morning, which felt like it belonged to a different day. They found crackers and peanut butter in Wren's bag, and Cassie ate them methodically while Griff drank his coffee and Wren sat in the chair by the door, and they all waited. At 2:17 in the afternoon, a car pulled into the parking lot and stopped near the back of the building. Griff was at the window immediately. He stood there for a moment, and then something in his shoulders released just slightly. "One person," he said. "Woman, driving alone." Wren went to the door and opened it before the knock came. The woman who stepped in was in her early 50s. Medium height, unremarkable clothing, the kind of face that people do not remember immediately, which Cassie suspected was not accidental. Her eyes were dark and quick and moved around the room efficiently cataloging. They landed on Cassie and stayed there. "You must be Nora's daughter," she said. "Yes. Are you Petra Dunwald?" "I am." She sat in the chair that Wren had vacated. She did not take off her coat. She folded her hands in her lap and looked at Cassie with an expression that Cassie could not entirely read, but that had something in it of the expression Griff had worn on the porch the night before. The expression of a person who had braced for something and arrived to find it was something else than they had braced for. "Your mother contacted me," Dunwald said, indirectly, 3 years ago. She did not reveal what she had, but she told me she was building something and that when the time came, she would need someone on the inside who still had enough standing to do something with it. She is gone now, I know. I am sorry. She looked at Cassie carefully. "She told me about you. She said you would be able to explain everything clearly, and I should listen to everything you said without deciding in advance what to make of it." That sounds like her. It does. She was precise about people. She was precise about everything. Dunwald unfolded her hands and set them flat on her knees. "Tell me what is on the drive," she said. "From the beginning. I will tell you what I can use and how." So Cassie told her. Not because Griff could not have told her, not because Wren could not have, but because the drive had been her mother's and the knowledge on it had been passed to her, and she was the one who had carried it through 3 days of snow and cold and a phone call with a man who spoke in that reasonable, gentle, dangerous voice. She told Petra Dunwald everything. Every file, every name, every recording. She described the financial documents and the blackmail records and the audio files and the evidence about Judge Aldridge. She described it with the precision her mother had instilled in her over 8 years of being taught that details were the difference between a story and proof. Dunwald listened without interrupting. When Cassie finished, she was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "The file about me." "Yes. Did you read it?" "Yes." Dunwald looked at the wall for a moment, then back. "All right," she said. "All right, there are 3 people inside the Bureau who I trust with my life and who are not connected to Voss or anyone connected to Voss. I have been waiting 12 years for something I could bring to them, something that did not have my own damaged credibility as its only foundation." "This is that something," Cassie said. "This is that something, then let's use it." Dunwald pulled out a phone, not the one she had answered earlier, a different one, Thurman. She made a call and spoke quietly and with the efficiency of someone who had been preparing for this conversation for a long time. When she hung up, she looked at Griff. "They need to move tonight," she said, "before Voss understands how far this has gone. Are you somewhere he cannot find you?" "He found us before," Cassie said. "He finds everyone eventually," Dunwald said. "The question is whether eventually comes before or after we are done." "It came before today," Griff said. Harkin called. He knew we had left the shelter. "Harkin." Dunwald's mouth tightened. Yes, he would. He checked the time on her phone. "We have less time than I thought." She stood. Something had changed in the room. Not just urgency, something more than that. The feeling of a thing that has been building for a very long time, finally arriving at the place where it either breaks or holds. Cassie stood too. Dunwald looked at her. "You did something very difficult for a very long time," she said. "Carrying this here." "I had help," Cassie said. She looked at Griff. "And I had a good map." Dunwald almost smiled. Almost. Then she opened the motel room door, and the cold afternoon light came in, and they went out into it. They were in the parking lot moving toward Dunwald's car when the black SUV turned into the far end of the lot and stopped. One vehicle, then a second behind it pulling in from the other entrance, blocking both exits. Griff moved in front of Cassie without a word. Pure reflex. She did not argue. She looked around the edge of him at the vehicles. Three men got out of the first one. Harkin was the one in the center. She recognized him from her mother's description. Not large, but precise looking. The kind of man who solves problems methodically. He looked at them across the lot. Then his eyes found Cassie moving past Griff with the practiced efficiency of someone who has learned to identify the most important thing in a room immediately. End of the road, Mr. Morrow, he said. Mr. Voss would like to speak with his daughter. She is not going anywhere with you, Griff said. That is not your decision to make. Wren had her phone out. She was holding it up, camera facing outward, the red dot of a live recording visible on the screen. Harkin's eyes moved to it. We are streaming, Wren said. Everything you say is going on live. The feed is going to 7 news outlets and 2 federal email addresses simultaneously. This was not entirely a bluff. Wren had set up the feed before they left the shelter. Whether it was reaching everything she claimed it was reaching was less certain. But Harkin did not know that. He looked at the phone, then at Griff, then at Dunwald, and something changed in his expression when he recognized her. A small shift, not fear, something adjacent to it. Agent Dunwald, he said. His voice was careful now. Former agent, she said, currently a private citizen with a great deal of documentation about your activities and the activities of your employer over a period of 11 years. That documentation is in the hands of 3 active FBI agents as of approximately 90 minutes ago. She held up her own phone. I have confirmation. Harkin stood very still. The 2 men on either side of him looked at each other with the look of men who are recalculating. The second SUV had not moved. Its doors had not opened. The live stream, Wren said steadily. Just so you are aware, his face is already going out. Harkin looked at her, then at Cassie. Cassie looked back at him without looking away. She was cold. The parking lot was all ice and shadow at this hour, and her jacket was not made for standing still in it. But she stood still. She thought about her mother at 18, 19, 20, making calculations about what she could afford to face and what she could not. She thought about 8 years of careful, frightened, determined movement. She thought about a voice going quiet in a motel room on a Sunday morning. She did not look away. Harkin's radio crackled. He turned slightly and listened. Something crossed his face. He pressed the radio and spoke 2 words too quietly to hear. Then he stood there for another long moment. Then he looked at the men beside him and said something, and they got back in the SUV. He looked at Cassie one more time. His expression was unreadable. Then he walked back to the vehicle and got in, and the SUVs backed out of the lot, one and then the other, and were gone. The parking lot was very quiet. Wren lowered her phone. Her hands were not quite steady. Griff let out a breath that he had apparently been holding for some time. Cassie stood in the cold and looked at the place where the vehicles had been. He got a call, she said, just before he backed off. Someone told him something. Dunwall was already on her phone again. She listened for a moment and then said yes and then ended the call. They have Voss, she said, 30 minutes ago. His lawyers will have him out within the day on a bond arrangement, but the documentation is already in federal hands, and the charges that are going to follow are not the kind that bond arrangements resolve. Cassie looked at her. Is it enough? Dunwall looked back at her with those quick, dark eyes. Your mother spent 8 years making sure it would be enough, she said. It is enough. Cassie nodded. She was very tired, not the tired of walking which she knew how to manage, the other kind. The tired that comes after something is finished that you have been holding up for a long time. Griff put his hand on her shoulder. Not speaking, just present. She did not lean into it. She was not ready for that yet, but she did not step away. She stood in the parking lot in the cold afternoon light and let herself be tired for a moment. Just a moment. There was still everything ahead. Lawyers and courts and questions and the long, uncertain process of what came next. There was still the fact of Sunday morning in the motel room and the particular shape of the silence after. But the thing her mother had built over 8 years in fear and hope and exhaustion was in the hands of people who could use it now. The voice on those recordings was going to be heard in rooms where it would matter. The names in those documents were going to be read by people who could not be told to look away. She had carried it here. Through the snow and the cold, in 3 days of forward motion and a phone call, with a man who spoke with dangerous gentleness in a parking lot with 2 black SUVs blocking both exits. She had not put it down. Her mother had told her in those last clear hours that she had always known Cassie could do this. She had said it the way she said things she meant completely, without drama, just as a fact she had known for a long time and was finally getting to say out loud. Cassie had believed her, not because she felt brave, because her mother did not say things she did not mean. She stood in the cold and let the tired be there, and then she picked it up again the way she always did and turned toward Griff and Wren and Dunwald. "What do we do now?" she said. "Now," Dunwald said, "we make sure it sticks." Cassie nodded. "Then let's go." The federal arraignment happened on a Thursday. Cassie did not attend. Dunwald had explained carefully and without condescension that the arraignment was procedural and that the important things would happen later in rooms that required more preparation and more patience. She said that Cassie's job right now was not to watch Harlan Voss stand before a judge. Her job was to be somewhere safe and let the people whose entire career had been built for this moment do what they had trained to do. Cassie understood the logic. She did not entirely like it, but she understood it. She spent that Thursday in the back room of Wren's shelter at the old offline computer, writing down everything she remembered about the past 6 days in the order it had happened. Not because anyone had asked her to, because her mother had taught her that memory is unreliable and documentation is not, and that the most important time to write something down is before you have had enough time to smooth the difficult parts into something more comfortable. She wrote for 4 hours. When she was finished, she printed it and put it in an envelope and gave it to Wren for safekeeping. Griff watched her do this from the doorway of the room and did not say anything. That evening, he made soup from things in Wren's kitchen, which turned out to be something he was better at than Cassie would have predicted. He set a bowl in front of her at the table and sat across from her with his own, and they ate without talking for a while. Then he said the social worker is coming tomorrow morning. Cassie looked up. Her name is Ruth Ann Albee. She is from the county office, and she is not connected to Voss or anyone in his organization. Dunwald verified that specifically. "All right. She is going to ask you questions about where you have been and who you have been with and whether you feel safe. I know what social workers ask." He looked at her. "Of course you do." She continued eating. The soup was chicken and vegetables, and it was better than it had any right to be given what she had seen him working with. "What happens after the question?" she said. "That depends on what you say and what she concludes. There will be a process, temporary placement, while the courts determine guardianship. It could be fast or it could take time. These things usually take time." "Where would I be placed?" He was quiet for a moment. "If I file for emergency guardianship and if the court agrees, you would be with me during the process. If they do not agree, you would go to a licensed foster home while the case is reviewed." She set her spoon down. "Have you filed?" "I filed this afternoon." She looked at him across the table. He was looking back at her with an expression that had something careful in it. Not anxious, more like a man who has committed to something and is being honest about the fact that he does not know how it will go. She picked up her spoon and finished the soup. "Thank you," she said. He nodded. After dinner, she sat on the couch in the shelter's front room with the photograph in her lap, not holding it, just resting her hand on the plastic sleeve. The lamp in the corner was on. The shelter was quiet around her. Somewhere in the building, someone was moving slowly through the rooms, checking things the way Wren moved at the end of each day, making sure everything was in order for whatever the next day required. She thought about her mother writing the letter. 8 years ago, in a room somewhere with a newborn sleeping nearby, sitting down and writing words to a man she had chosen not to call because she did not want to put him in danger. Writing them anyway because not writing them would have meant accepting that the world she was living in was all there was, and she had never accepted that. She had kept the letter for 8 years. Cassie had not known about it. She had known about the photograph and the drawing and the address and the instructions. She had not known about the letter. She wondered what else her mother had kept that she did not know about. What other careful preparations had been made in rooms Cassie had not been in at hours when she was asleep. How many times her mother had sat in the dark and built something for a future she was not certain she would see. Wren came into the front room and sat in the chair across from her. "Can I ask you something?" Wren said. "Yes." "What do you want?" "Not what needs to happen, not what the court decides." "What do you want?" Cassie thought about it seriously. She always thought about serious questions seriously. It was one of the things her mother had been most insistent about. The people who ask you careless questions deserve careful answers, she used to say, because careful answers are how you teach people to ask better ones next time. I want to stop moving, Cassie said. I have lived in 23 places. I want to live in one place long enough that I know what the seasons look like there. I want to go to the same school in September that I went to in April. I want to know a librarian by name. Wren was quiet. I want someone to be there when I wake up from nightmares. Not to fix them, just to be there. She looked at the photograph in her lap. And I want someone to tell me things about my mother. Things I do not already know. The small things, what she laughed at, what she was afraid of before she was afraid of him, what she was like when she was 8. Wren's expression did something complicated. She was fierce at 8, Wren said. I only knew her for 2 weeks years later, but you could see it in her. The way she made decisions, the way she held herself when things were hard. It was not something she learned as an adult. You could tell it had always been there. Cassie absorbed this. She was like you, Wren said, in that way. Cassie looked at her hands. I hope so, she said. The social worker arrived at 9 the next morning. Ruth Ann Albee was a woman in her mid-40s with sensible shoes and reading glasses on a beaded chain, in the particular manner of someone who has spent 20 years listening to people describe difficult situations and has learned to do so without her face telling them what she thinks before she is ready to say it. She sat across from Cassie in the shelter's small meeting room with a notepad and a cup of tea that Wren had brought without being asked, and asked her questions. Cassie answered them. Completely and without evasion, the way her mother had taught her to answer questions from officials who were not connected to Voss. You do not have to be afraid of honest people, her mother had said. Honest people are trying to find the same thing you are. The truth. Ruth Ann Albee asked about the motel room and Cassie described it. She asked about the 3 days of traveling and Cassie described those too. She asked about Griff, how he had behaved, whether Cassie had felt safe, whether there had been moments of anger or unpredictability. Cassie said he opened the door. He made hot chocolate from a packet because it was what he had. He let me sleep on the couch with the lamp on without asking why I needed it. When things became dangerous, he stood in front of me, which I did not ask him to do, and which he did not announce. He just did it. Ruth Ann Albee wrote things on her notepad. He filed for emergency guardianship yesterday, Cassie said. I did not ask him to do that either. Are you glad he did? Yes. Why? Because he is the only person left who knew my mother before everything went wrong. And because she sent me to him. She had 8 years to change her mind, and she did not. Ruth Ann Albee looked at her over the reading glasses. You are a very clear thinker, she said. My mother taught me to be. The social worker closed her notepad. I am going to be honest with you, she said. The emergency guardianship petition is unconventional. Mr. Morrow's background presents complications. There are people in my office who will look at his record and make assumptions that are not entirely unreasonable given that record. I know what I can do is provide an honest assessment of what I observed today. An honest assessment is the only thing I can offer you. That is enough, Cassie said. An honest assessment is all we need. Ruth Ann Albee left an hour later. Cassie sat in the meeting room for a while after she was gone, not thinking about anything in particular, just letting the conversation settle. Then Griff knocked on the open door. How did it go? I told her the truth. She is honest. She will write an honest report. He came in and sat in the chair across from her, the one the social worker had used. He looked tired in the way that people look tired when they have not been sleeping, which Cassie had noticed about him since the second night. He had the quality of someone sitting very close to something that mattered a great deal and trying not to grip it too hard. Can I tell you something, she said. He looked at her. My mother wrote you a letter the night I was born. She did not send it. It was in her things. I found it with the drive. He went very still. I did not read it. It was addressed to you. She looked at him. I have it in my bag. He did not say anything for a moment. Then he said she wrote it the night you were born. Yes, she kept it for 8 years. He looked at the table. His hands were flat on the surface the way they had been in the kitchen that first morning when he had been trying to absorb too many things at once. Cassie reached into her jacket pocket and took out a small envelope, the kind that comes with greeting cards, slightly worn at the edges from being carried. She set it on the table between them. He looked at it for a long time. Then he picked it up carefully. He did not open it. He held it in both hands the way he had held the photograph. "You can read it later," Cassie said. "There is no hurry." He nodded. He put it in his shirt pocket over his heart without saying anything else. The hearing for emergency guardianship was scheduled for the following Tuesday. 4 days away. In those 4 days, three things happened that Cassie would remember for the rest of her life in the particular way that important things are remembered. Not as a sequence of events, but as a set of images that carry their meaning without needing to be explained. The first was on Saturday morning when Blythe Harmon published her story. It ran in the independent outlet she worked for and was immediately picked up by 11 other publications within 6 hours. It was long and carefully sourced, and it named names that had never been named publicly before. It used the documentation from the drive, the recordings, the financial records, the evidence about Judge Aldridge. It quoted Petra Dunwald by name, which Cassie understood was something Dunwald had chosen deliberately a statement as much as a contribution. It described Cassie only as a minor who had carried her mother's evidence to safety after Nora Lane's death, and it described what Nora had built over 8 years with a precision and a respect that made Cassie have to sit down and be still for a little while after she read it. By Saturday evening, Harlan Voss's attorney had announced that his client was cooperating fully with federal investigators, which Dunwald, when Griff called her, described as the legal equivalent of a man dropping everything he is carrying and putting his hands in the air. The second thing happened on Sunday. Griff asked Cassie if she wanted to come to the garage, not the barn at his house, a different place. A garage in town where he had apparently rented a space for years where he went to work on engines when he needed to think, which she gathered was something he had done for a long time and which served the same function for him that writing things down served for her. She went with him. She sat on an overturned crate and watched him work on an old motorcycle that was in pieces and asked questions about what each piece did, and he answered them without making her feel like the questions were small. He explained the way things fit together with the patience of someone who genuinely found the fitting together of things interesting and wanted whoever was listening to find it interesting too. At some point, she stopped asking questions and just watched. The garage was warm and smelled of oil and metal, and the radio in the corner played old country music that neither of them commented on. Outside the small window, it was snowing again lightly, the kind of snow that is more like the memory of snow than snow itself. She thought about what it might be like to come here on a Saturday, to sit on the crate and read while the radio played and the snow came down outside and someone she knew moved around the familiar edges of the room doing something they were good at. She had not had a Saturday like that in 8 years. She thought she might like one. The third thing happened on Monday evening. Griff read the letter. He did not tell her he was going to read it. He went to his room, which in Wren's shelter was a small space with a cot that Wren had set up for him, and he closed the door. He was in there for a long time. Cassie sat in the front room and read a book that Wren had found for her and did not try to listen and did not go to the door. When he came out, his face was the face of a man who has moved through something and come out the other side of it and has not yet decided what the other side looks like. He sat on the couch beside her, not close, just in the same space. She waited. After a while, she said, "You had her eyes." Cassie looked up from the book. In the letter, she said you had her eyes and her way of being still when things move fast around you. She said she was sorry you were going to grow up without knowing what that stillness had cost her to learn. She said she hoped it came easier to you. Cassie thought about the motel room and the 3 days walking and the phone call with Voss and the parking lot with the SUVs. "It does not come entirely easy," she said. No, he looked at his hands. She said to tell you if I ever got the chance that the bravest thing she ever did was not the drive or the documentation or the running. She said the bravest thing was believing that someone would come for you when she could not. Cassie sat with that for a moment. She came herself, Cassie said, in every way she could. The address, the instructions, the drive, the letter. She came as far forward as she could, and then she sent me the rest of the way. He nodded. His jaw was set in the way it got when he was managing something carefully. "I should have picked up the phone," he said. 9 years ago, I should have picked up. She did not blame you, I know. He looked at the wall. That almost makes it harder. Cassie closed her book. She thought about what her mother would say to this if she were here. She thought about it carefully because her mother had been precise about the things she said on important subjects, and Cassie wanted to be precise too. She would say she said slowly that the time you did not pick up is over, and the time you have now is not. She would say, do not spend the present paying for the past when the present has a use. He looked at her. She said things like that a lot, Cassie said. She did not believe in waste. He was quiet for a moment. Then something moved across his face that was not quite a smile, but was something in the same territory, warmer than she had seen from him before. No, he said, she never did. The courtroom on Tuesday morning was smaller than Cassie had expected. Wood paneling, fluorescent lights, the particular institutional smell of a room that has contained many difficult conversations and absorbed them all equally. There were chairs along one wall where Wren and Ruth Ann Albee sat, and a table where Griff sat with a lawyer named McAdam, who had called Griff on Sunday and offered to represent him for reasons that Griff had explained briefly, as the lawyer being someone who owed someone who had asked a favor. The judge was a man named Waverly, 60s gray at the temples, the expression of someone who has been making decisions about other people's lives for long enough that the weight of it has settled into the lines of his face permanently, and he has made his peace with carrying it. Across the aisle, a woman from the county's family services office sat with her own folder and her own careful expression. Cassie sat beside Griff. Judge Waverly looked at the paperwork in front of him. Then he looked at the room. Then he looked at Cassie. Young lady, he said, I am going to speak to you directly if that is all right. Yes, sir, she said. I have read the social worker's report. I have read the petitioner's history and the circumstances of your mother's death and the events of the past week. I have a general picture of what has happened. What I do not have is what you would like to tell me yourself, so I am asking. Cassie folded her hands in her lap. She had thought about this, not rehearsed. Her mother had always said that rehearsed things sound rehearsed, and that judges, like most people, could hear the difference between a person speaking and a person performing. She had thought about it the way she thought about the important things, from the outside in. My mother spent 8 years keeping me safe, she said. She gave up everything that people are supposed to have: a home, a community, a permanent name. She gave those things up so that I would be alive, and so that what she knew about Harlan Voss would eventually reach people who could do something with it. She did both of those things successfully. At the end of her life, when she could see that she was not going to be there to finish what she had started, she made one more decision. She decided who would take care of me. She chose Griff Morrow. She did not choose him because he was the easiest choice. She chose him because she knew him better than she knew almost anyone, and she believed he was the right person. The room was quiet. I believe her, Cassie said. I have spent 6 days with him now. I have watched him make decisions under pressure, and I have watched him manage things that were frightening without making me more frightened. I have watched him do things that cost him something without being asked to and without making sure I noticed. That is not a performance. That is a person. She looked at Judge Waverly directly. My mother trusted him with the most important thing she had. I am asking you to do the same. Judge Waverly looked at her for a long moment. His expression had not changed exactly, but something in it had shifted the way things shift when a person arrives at a conclusion they did not know they had already reached. He looked at the family services representative. Your office's recommendation, he said. The woman opened her folder. Given the unusual circumstances in the social worker's assessment, she said, and given the minor's expressed preference and the demonstrated conduct of the petitioner during the events of the past week, the office is not prepared to oppose the petition. We are recommending a supervised arrangement with monthly check-ins for a period of 6 months, that after which the arrangement would be reviewed. Judge Waverly nodded. He made a note. Then he looked at Griff. Mr. Morrow, stand up. Griff stood. I have your record in front of me. It is not a short document. No, sir. I am going to ask you one question, and I want you to understand that I am not asking it to give you an opportunity to say the right thing. I am asking it because I want to hear how you answer it. Do you understand the difference? Yes. If you fail this child, if you make choices that put her at risk or that demonstrate that you are not capable of providing what she needs, what happens? Griff looked at him steadily. She has already lost one person who was supposed to be there, he said. If I fail her, she loses another. That is not something I am willing to have on my account. Judge Waverly looked at him for a moment. Sit down. Griff sat. The judge wrote something on the document in front of him. He wrote for a moment without speaking. The fluorescent lights hummed above them. Somewhere in the building, a door opened and closed. Emergency guardianship is granted, Judge Waverly said, to take effect immediately subject to the supervised arrangement outlined by the Family Services Office. The arrangement will be reviewed in 6 months. He looked at Cassie. You have a voice in this, he said. If anything changes, you say so. To your social worker, to this court, to anyone you trust. You understand? Yes, sir. Good. He closed the folder. We are done here. They walked out of the courthouse into a morning that was cold and bright and entirely itself. The sky was the particular blue that follows a clear night, the kind that makes everything on the ground look sharper and more deliberate than usual. Wren was crying, not loudly, just the quiet kind that she seemed to prefer. A few tears tracked down the side of her face that she wiped away without comment. McAdams shook Griff's hand and said something about paperwork and timelines and was gone within 2 minutes, which Cassie appreciated about him. Ruth Ann Albee stopped in front of Cassie before she left. You spoke well in there, she said. My mother taught me to. The social worker nodded. She paused. Then she said she must have been remarkable. She was, Cassie said. She really was. Ruth Ann Albee left. Wren hugged Cassie and then Griff and then said she had to get back to the shelter and would see them both soon and was gone. And then it was just the two of them on the courthouse steps. Griff looked at her. She looked at him. The morning went on around them. A car passed on the street. A pigeon decided the railing 2 steps down was worth investigating and then decided it was not. The cold was sharp and clean, and Cassie's breath made small clouds in front of her face. She thought about what came next. Not in terms of the large things. Those would take time, and she understood that. 6 months of check-ins, a school to enroll in, a permanent place to sleep, the long, unglamorous, necessary work of building a life in one location from things that were available. She thought about the small next thing. Your house needs a working heater in the back room, she said. He looked at her. If I am going to have my own room, it needs to be warm. He considered this. I can fix the heater. I know you can. She looked at him. Can we go to the garage after? I want to see how the engine fits together. Something moved across his face. That thing that was not quite a smile but was warmer than anything else she had seen from him, and that she was beginning to understand was simply what he looked like when he was not managing himself carefully. Yeah, he said, we can do that. They walked down the courthouse steps into the bright morning. 3 weeks later, on a Saturday in late February, they drove up into the mountains. It had taken that long to arrange. Dunwald had needed to confirm that certain restrictions on travel were lifted, given the ongoing federal process. Ruth Ann Albee had needed to approve the trip as part of the supervisory arrangement. Griff had needed to find a location that matched what Cassie described from her mother's words. Mountains that felt free, Nora had said in her last clear hours, pressed against Cassie's hair. Somewhere with sky enough that a person does not feel enclosed. He had found a meadow 3 hours north. He had been there once years ago for reasons he did not explain, and he said it was the kind of place that earned its silence. Cassie had trusted this judgment. The drive took the time it took. They did not talk much. The road climbed through pine and then above the tree line into open country where the snow was still thick and unbroken, and the peaks above caught the morning light and held it. They parked where the road ended and walked the rest of the way. Cassie carried the small wooden box that a man at a crematorium in Garnet Falls had given her after she had called and explained, and after he had confirmed with the Ruth Ann Albee that this was sanctioned, and after she had thanked him in a way that he had apparently found affecting because his voice had been careful when he said goodbye. The meadow appeared from between 2 stands of pine, wide and white and entirely quiet. The sky above it was the kind of sky that made the word enormous feel insufficient. All around the edges of the meadow, the wildflowers that would come in spring were buried under snow, but Cassie knew they were there. Her mother had known too. Somewhere she had seen this place or a place like it and had known it was what she wanted. They stopped at the center of the meadow. The wind was light and moved across the surface of the snow in small currents. Cassie held the box and stood still for a moment. Do you want to say something first? Griff said. She shook her head. She needed the quiet first. She stood in it. The mountain cold and the enormous ski and the white silence of the meadow, and somewhere under the snow the waiting flowers. She thought about her mother at 8 years old, fierce in the way that Ren had described. She thought about her mother at 19 meeting a man in front of a truck and knowing something about him immediately that she trusted. She thought about her mother at 26 in the photograph looking at the camera as though she had decided to trust it and was not entirely sure she had made the right call and choosing to look anyway. She thought about all the rooms her mother had sat in all the places they had lived, doing the careful, patient, frightened, determined work of keeping them both alive and keeping the truth intact so that one day it could reach the people who could use it. She thought about a voice going quiet on a Sunday morning and the particular way the room had changed. She opened the box. "Mom," she said, "the wind moved. You did it. You said you would, and you did. Everything is where you wanted it to be. The people who needed to know are starting to know. The people who needed to answer for things are starting to answer." She paused. "I found him. You were right about him. You were right about a lot of things." The meadow was very still around her. "I am going to be okay. I am going to live in one place. I am going to know a librarian by name. I am going to learn what the seasons look like in one town from one window." Her voice was steady. She had cried in the days between. In the back room of the shelter late at night, the kind of crying that has been accumulating for a long time and needs to go somewhere eventually. She had let it go, and then she had come back to steady, which was what her mother had always done and which Cassie understood now as its own kind of inheritance. "I love you," she said, "more than the whole sky." She scattered the ashes into the wind. They rose and moved outward across the meadow, mixing with the bright, cold air carried by the light wind toward the peaks and the enormous sky above them. Griff stood beside her and did not speak for a long time. Then quietly he said she would have loved this place. "Yes," Cassie said, "she would have." They stood there together until the wind had carried everything it was going to carry. Then they walked back through the snow toward the road. On the way down the mountain, Cassie watched the trees come back pine by pine, and the road unspool ahead of them, and the sky begin to lower toward the horizon as they descended. She thought about what was on the other side of the drive home. The house on the gravel road with its peeling paint and the heater in the back room that now worked. The school she would start on Monday. The library she had already visited once where the librarian's name was apparently Margaret, and who had shown Cassie the section on natural science without being asked because Cassie had been looking at it in the way that people look at things they would like to explore but are not sure they have permission to. She thought about the garage on Saturday mornings and the radio playing old country music and the smell of oil and cold air, and something she was beginning to understand as the particular quality of a place where a person does something they are good at and the people who care about them are near enough to be present without being in the way. She thought about the photograph on the shelf in the back room. She had put it there herself in the frame she had found at a secondhand store in town. Her mother and Griff young and laughing in front of the truck, the summer her mother had later called the summer she was happiest. Beside it, she had placed a second photograph, this one taken 3 days ago by Ren on her phone and printed at the drugstore in town. Cassie and Griff in the courthouse parking lot, not posed just standing in the morning light. Cassie looking at something outside the frame. Griff looking at her with that expression that was not quite a smile but warmer than anything else. Two photographs on a shelf in a room that was hers. She thought about what her mother had said in those last clear hours. "You know what to do, Cass. You have always known." She had not known exactly. She had not had a plan in the sense of a mapped and detailed document. She had had a direction and a name and an address in the particular kind of courage that is less like a feeling and more like a decision you make again every time you need to make it. She had walked forward. She had not put it down. That was what her mother had given her. Not safety, which could not be given. Not a guaranteed outcome, which did not exist. But the belief instilled so deeply it had become structural that walking forward with the truth in your hands was worth the cost of carrying it. She looked at Griff's profile as he drove. The jaw and the gray at the temples and the old leather jacket. The man her mother had trusted with the most important things she had. She reached over and put her hand on the console between the seats, not reaching for his hand. Just there. He looked down at it, and then at the road, and then after a moment he put his own hand on the console beside hers. Not holding, just present. The mountains fell away behind them, and the road leveled out, and the town appeared ahead in the winter afternoon light, familiar now in the way that places become familiar when you have decided to stay in them. 6 months later, on a Thursday morning in late spring, Cassie stood in front of her second grade class. Her teacher, Mrs. Holt, had asked everyone to bring something from home that mattered to them, something they wanted to explain to the class. The other children had brought photographs of pets and drawings they had made, and a rock with a fossil in it and a baseball signed by someone whose name Cassie did not recognize, but who was clearly significant to the boy presenting it. Cassie brought the photograph, not the one from the shelf. A copy printed at the drugstore on good paper and placed in a simple frame that she had bought with her own money from the allowance that Griff had started giving her on Fridays, which she saved more than she spent because old habits persisted. She held it up. "This is a picture of my mom and my dad," she said, "when they were young, before things got hard." The class looked at it. "My mom died last winter. She had been sick for a long time. She worked very hard her whole life to make sure that bad people were held accountable for bad things, and she succeeded." There was a pause. "That is not most people's life, but it was hers, and she did it very well." Mrs. Holt was very still at the edge of the room. "My mom made sure I found my dad before she died. She had been planning it for a long time. She was very organized." A boy in the front row said, "Is your dad the one with the motorcycle?" "Yes, my dad saw him pick you up from school once. He said he looks tough." Cassie considered this. "He is," she said, "and he makes very good soup. Those things are not contradictory." The class absorbed this. "My mom always said the best families are not the ones you are born into automatically. She said the best families are built out of choices made by people who choose each other on purpose." She looked at the photograph for a moment. "She chose him for me, and I think she chose well." She sat down. Mrs. Holt gave her a sticker that said "Excellent work," which Cassie accepted without comment and placed carefully inside the front cover of her notebook, because it was the thought that counted, and Mrs. Holt had meant it genuinely. That evening, Griff made dinner, and they ate at the table by the window that looked out on the gravel driveway and the trees beyond it. The days were longer now, and there was still light in the sky at 7 o'clock, the particular gold of late spring that made everything it touched look like it had been there for a long time and was going to stay. She told him about show and tell. He listened without interrupting, which was one of the things she had come to appreciate about him. He was not a person who filled silences with noise. When she finished, he said, "The boy said I looked tough." She looked at him across the table. "You do look tough." He picked up his fork. "The soup is good tonight," she said. "It is the same soup as last time." "I know, it is still good." He almost smiled. She was getting better at identifying the almost smiles. They were more frequent than they had been in February. She tracked this the way she tracked other data that seemed important. After dinner, she did her homework at the table while he read in the chair by the window. The house around them made its familiar noises, the creak of the second floorboard in the hallway, the way the kitchen window caught the wind at a particular angle and made a sound like someone considering whether to knock. She had been here long enough to know its sounds. She thought about what it meant to know a place's sounds, to have learned them one by one until they were no longer interruptions but background, the texture of somewhere that had become yours. She thought about 23 places that had not become that. She finished her homework and put it in her backpack and went to the back room, which was warm now, and had her books on a shelf and the two photographs on a smaller shelf above the desk and a lamp that she chose to leave on. She lay down and looked at the ceiling and listened to the house. In the front room, the lamp clicked off. Footsteps down the hall, pausing outside her door for a moment, in the way they always paused, not to check, just to be there and then moving on. She closed her eyes. Outside the window, the spring night was moving through the yard unhurried, carrying the smell of pine and thawed earth. Somewhere down the road, something was beginning to bloom. She was in one place. She knew its sounds. She was still.